The Lincoln's Legends podcast is proudly brought to you by two amazing sponsors that are local businesses from right here in Springfield. MilesT-shirts.com, top-notch printing at a great price, and Laces Footwear. Why buy kicks and threads at separate places when the freshest gear is all at Laces? LacesFootwear.com. What's up, everybody? It's Bailey. Thank you so much for hanging out with me this week. Let's pick up right where we left off. Last week's episode, we sat down with Mac Warren, the director of the Hoogland Center for the Arts, Full Monty. There's still a few days to catch the show. It's playing January 23rd through the 25th. Check out hcfta.org for more details. That episode went down a rabbit hole, and it got real dirty real quick. But it's also hilarious at the same time. If you want to hear more, you got to download the episode. I decided that I need to make some changes in the wording of my content. I'll do my best to no longer use the word exclusive when referencing interviews. You see, I take great pride in what I do, and I'm stoked to have you listening to the show. Personally, I hate reading or listening to regurgitated information. I promise I'll do my best to exhaust all resources before sharing any secondhand content with you. I care enough about the show for you to hear it first. Now, let's talk about this week's episode. This week, Marvel released Star Wars #1. I'm fucking stoked about it. It's an awesome book. And while I was at Comic Service, I convinced Jim to sit down with me and grant me an interview. And this might not sound like a big deal to you if you don't know Jim, but this is huge. He's owned his local comic shop for over 20 years, and he's never let anybody have an interview like this before. Let's start the show. Welcome to the Lincoln's Legends podcast. I am pretty stoked. I'm sitting across the table from Jim Boarman of Comic Service. Welcome, my friend.
Thanks, Sharon.
You gotta get closer now. I know you got a lot to say.
Thanks, Sharon.
Yeah. So let's start out with the plugs. Where are we? Exact address, everything else.
1000 Stanford. Catty corner from Bun Park, I guess, is probably.
So we've got a lot of stuff going on in this strip mall. It's I guess it's built piece by piece. Unfortunately, you have a casino next door now.
They have more traffic than I do.
Oh God! But it must. It look for me. I've seen other businesses, and I treat it like a pawn shop. It's so depressing watching people go in and out. But let's talk about the store. Owned, operated locally.
Yeah. Since '93.
Since '93. It's 20 years.
22 coming up summertime. 22 coming up summertime. I worked for a guy in the early '90s, and he closed in '93 and put me in a position to be somebody else's customer or open my own store. And there's enough local traffic that some years later, people are still patronizing me.
So tell me about that takeover. Was it that you were one of the frequent customers, or you were employed by him?
Yeah, I was a customer that became an employee, and then he closed. And your situation was go look for a job or pick up where you left off. And his customers were thrown to the four winds when he closed. And it took about 6 months for them to figure out word of mouth that I didn't go with them to Peoria.
Okay, so he packed up and went to Peoria.
They left town. They'd opened 4 stores on the heels of the Death of Superman event in '92.
Oh my gosh.
And it wasn't a smart thing to do, but nobody would. When people are running their own business, they don't listen to other people's advice. And you couldn't talk about what they were doing. So this many years later, I don't open a second store.
Well, I couldn't imagine that. Well, how do I say? I mean, I don't know how to run a business because I don't have a business degree, but I would hope that I'll say it like this: you got a restaurant in town that does really, really well. It's packed all the time, and then someone's like, "Hey, you know what we should do? We should open another business." I wouldn't open another business because for me, one of the best things you can have from your business is a line at the door. Is that how you feel?
I think if you ran a second business, you'd have to have somebody run it the same way because they'd expect it to be run the same way.
And there aren't two of you.
And you can't be in two places at once. That was my criticism of him doing that in the '90s because everybody came to us. There was no reason to open in those outer towns. They came to Springfield regardless. But you weren't going to talk a guy out of his own venture in that time period because it was a different time period. The Death of Superman was something I've never seen and nothing like since then. I don't get quite the line that he did in those days, but in those days there was a lot of foil, a lot of glow in the dark, and a lot of 2 or 3 months later something was worth 2 or 3 times what he paid for it. And anymore that doesn't happen because the speculators are gone in favor of readers.
Yeah, I saw an interview. It was a PBS special about the Death of Superman, and there was a woman that was buying it because she wanted to send her kid to college with it.
Same as beanies. Beanies was more of a craze. But Superman was an event that mainly people believed it because the news treated it like it was a real death. And we knew he'd come back, but we didn't know when to tell people when. So it was just a matter of how long, and had he stayed dead longer, it might have been...
Wasn't it a short death? Like it was like a year or something?
He got killed in November, and they teased his return in April, and he came back in May without powers, and then by fall he had his powers back. So
oh my God! So that was. You think a lot of people got fired on that marketing campaign? Because
no, they said they only had a 2.5 million copy print run in '92.
Oh my God!
Everything was huge. Spawn #1, Alien vs Predator.
Now,
X-Force.
There's a question about Spawn too. Since we're in a comic shop, I can't help ask these questions. It's my understanding that one of the most popular Spider-Man artists drew the web, but the studio didn't like the way that he drew it, so he went and formed his own Spawn. He went and formed his own character, which was Spawn.
McFarlane worked on Spider-Man in the late '80s. And they would have lost him to another company, but he was they hired. They put him on his own Spider-Man book in 1990 that he wrote and drew.
Did it have to do with the web? That was the like 3D web, or the way it was drawn?
Well, the way he was drawing webbing, he was drawing globby webbing and little web balls down it, and his detail made it look interesting because it had never been done before. And they mandated that the other artists on the other books, do it the same way. It didn't look as well done. It looked like it was forced, but it was his style. His globby webbing, and then probably on the heels of that, where now Spider-Man can shoot web balls and things that before he had parachutes and whatever he could construct the webbing into, but now he's got more of an offensive, like he can launch them and have exploding web balls and stuff. But I don't know if that all came out of McFarlane's run. McFarlane's run was more, you saw the eyes become more expressive. They weren't just lenses, they squinted and opened bigger with a surprise look in that. But that's his style. When he left Marvel to do Spawn, he was supposed to stay on that book 3 years. He stayed about a year and a half, and he left with the idea that he was going to come back after the birth of his daughter, but he never came back. Marvel had probably made the mistake of paying him enough money for Spider-Man that they can be blamed for the existence of Image.
Oh wow!
Because he started a company and but elicited 5 other guys who were working for Marvel to come and join him in Image. And now 23 years later, Image started in '92. So we're heading into the 23rd year of their company. Spawn's about ready to hit number 250. And Al Simmons has been dead for, I say 186, 184 number-wise. And they're going to bring him back. And then next month, the book will restart with a new #1.
I know that there's 1,000 tangents that we can get on it. I would literally talk to you forever. So I'm going to try and do my best to keep some sort of following a North Star. Let's go back to the shop being open. Is it safe to say that you're the oldest shop in town for comics?
Probably, yeah. My boss has opened 5 years. Metropolis became Reader's World, and so without a name change for me being open as long as Prairie Archive's been around since the early '70s.
But they're not specialized.
They don't do new comic books.
Yeah.
I think it's a market that, as long as you're reliable to them, they're reliable to you.
Because I'd love to hear about the clientele. You got to see kids like grow up through your store. I mean, there's some guy that is probably a big fan of buying your books, and then he meets a woman, they have a kid, and his kid's shopping here, hopefully.
I think the strangest thing over 20 years' time is I saw guys that were teenagers when my boss was open, whose parents brought them. And now, this many years later, those guys are adults, and they're bringing in 10-year-olds because it has become a generational. And those kids may not be interested in comics so far, but they're going to be influenced by their parents. You see a lot of kids that come in that are too young to know what they know, but because what their parents expose them to. My kids were like that. They were exposed to Marvel and DC stuff when they were too well educated, non-kid things until their friends caught up with them.
Absolutely.
But there's guys that come here with their kids that are just little whizzes because what they're found an interest in or what their parents have exposed them to. And
it's crazy to, what do we say? I'm going to stutter because I'm really happy to have so many questions, but I didn't want to prep because it felt forced, and then that's, nobody needs that. I don't want to regurgitate anything. For storylines that you were, to go back to the comment that you were making, the storylines, kids will essentially have I don't want to say a better imagination, but maybe a more understanding, or how would you put that?
For what a comic book does to a young reader?
Yeah.
I think if you're a reader and you're reading a book and a character says something in a paragraph, you're not really going to explore what they meant. But if it's in a word balloon in a comic book, you're going to be more curious of what that character meant and maybe pursue that differently. And some parents bring in kids because they know if they can get them to read something, they can start them into an interest of being reading. And I passed a literature class in high school because my mother had Classics Illustrated, and I didn't bother reading the book that was assigned because I knew the story by the comic book.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
They didn't probably know that at the time.
If you're starting at, say, a new reader, what would you suggest to someone that, I mean, let's shoot the demo that I am. I just turned 30. If someone walks into the store and they're 30 and they have no, I mean, you go see one of the blockbusters, like, oh, I love to read this story. What would you influence them with?
Sometimes, depending on what brought them in, you can focus on that because that's what they're interested in. But depends on the age of the person. You know, there's younger age books, but for the most part,
yeah. But let's start like 30 and let's go back. Like, what would you say? It's like somebody's like saw a trailer for Ant-Man because that's going to be huge over the summer. What would you direct them to in the store to say start here?
Ant-Man #1 came out this week for a series. It'll help support the movie. It was an interesting read. It did okay, but you know the problem with today's comics is $4.99. It's going to hurt it. But #2 will be $3.99, just still to where we're at.
Is that too much?
I think the whole market's overpriced, but you know people are selling it in. We used to compare. I have a customer that compared gas prices to when they were $1 and comics were $1.
Yeah.
And as they went up, but now gas is going down, but comics aren't going to go down.
Oh wow. So, okay, so right now we'd say the Ant-Man just did a reboot, and they can come on in. That's totally fine. We can pause it. So, we'd say Ant-Man because it's popular right now. What would you say for the demographic of, I mean, because what is it? It's 18 to 25 and then below. So we go back 18 to 25. What would you suggest?
There's a lot of books anymore that don't have superheroes in them, and that's, I want to say it's a trend, but...
What type of book wouldn't have a superhero in it? Like, what is it, a novel? Is it a graphic novel? What would you define that as?
It's the Walking Dead effect.
Oh.
It's the popularity of something that... We've had a comic for Walking Dead since 2003, and then the show has been on for the past, I guess, 5 years, for 5 seasons. I don't think people realized the book was out as long as it was, but for it...
How long was it out before the TV show?
If it's been on for 5 years and it's now heading into its 11th year, then it was 5 or 6 years into its run.
Wow. So was it bought then and then sold and then keeps going, or how's that work?
I think once it was licensed for TV, you know, we'd had it as a comic book, and it sold average numbers for a black and white book, outlasted every other zombie book that came and went, and that's probably why it had been the one that got picked for TV, because it could have been another zombie storyline. But because of its success, you know, had it come and gone a season, we wouldn't be talking about it. You know, it'd be just another book. But now I order twice as many as I used to, and the people who don't buy it monthly buy it in collected form every 6 months because they got more patience than we do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, waiting for the seasons to kick back in for more of the show. But the effect of that, when something gets licensed for a TV show or a movie, and those back issues get sought after, if they were printed before the license, like The Crow or Men in Black, or anything that Dale Earnhardt made before he was wrecked. You know, after somebody's dead, they make things commemoratively in that.
Sure.
And that's just another for him. But if a comic is known, like next week is Star Wars #1 from Marvel, and it's going to have a 1 million copy print run. I ordered 60. I don't know how many of us would have had to order that many to make that many copies.
Oh my gosh.
But it's going to be available in, you know, I've heard it has as many as 75 covers.
75 covers?
I'll only have a handful of them because I only qualified for a few. But it'll be exclusive to some places, whether they're store outlets or that.
Oh my gosh.
To achieve that kind of number.
That's a collection by itself for the first run, isn't it?
Nobody will get them all.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, that's...
They'd either would be elusive or expensive. for regions and that.
Oh my gosh.
Even the ones that were 1 in 200, I don't qualify for because I was 60 copies. I'll get a 1 in 25. Two of those.
So Kevin Smith will get all 75, but that's about it.
Something like him that won. Mark Hamill, you know.
But he's probably by now. He probably. What do they say? He's got to write a check to Lucas every time he looks in the mirror. He probably don't want all those. He probably doesn't. Okay, so we've got we're moving backwards then. If if the kids from let's say grade school to 15, what if they came in? What would you say to?
Well, those kids have to usually come in with a parent. But the trend I see is mothers that bring in sons that buy Deadpool and fathers that bring in daughters that buy Harley Quinn.
Now, see, I need to talk to you about Harley Quinn.
And it's in that 13, 14, 15.
I really need to talk to you about Harley Quinn because I am very fortunate to have a family friend that is just getting into comics, and I will not be the person to introduce her to Harley Quinn. She is 11. I was lucky enough to find some books when I was in here. We got her for Christmas. We got her Buffy, the trade paperback, and we got her the trade paperback of Marvel Civil War, which for me that's fine, but I hate to say it, but I'm the dick. We go to the comic store, she's like, I want this. No, you can't read that. I want this. No, you can't. What do you do?
I think for the same reason that Bart Simpson was popular and disliked by parents because of his disrespectful attitude. And the same thing with Deadpool and Harley Quinn. They're characters that break the fourth wall and talk to the reader. When Ryan Reynolds plays Deadpool in the movie, that's going to be hilarious because it's going to be so quirky that
absolutely.
We're going to know it, we're going to get it.
Right.
And it should do well. The Suicide Squad movie wouldn't have done as well if it would just been a Dirty Dozen type movie, but by sticking Harley Quinn and Joker in it, it's going to be a different ballgame.
How do you feel about Jared Leto playing the Joker?
I think it's going to be a fun movie.
I do too. I really think with that character, I think a lot of people hold Heath Ledger very close because he reinvented that character.
He won't play him like him.
Oh no!
That's take a different
that's not the angle I'm taking. But
and they know that too.
There was the whole Nicholson that was the Joker, but he was more the mafia type. He was more the gangster in my mind.
He was more of a 50s era Dick Sprang Joker.
There you go. Yeah, but Heath Ledger was just a psychopath, and that was amazing.
Heath Ledger summoned the Killing Joker from Alan Moore's Killing Joke from '88.
The Tom Waits voice, or is it Watts? I don't know.
With the scraggly, he might have took that from Tom Waits, but the scraggly hair and the demeanor and that was from that '88 one shot where Barbara Gordon was paralyzed. Now Batgirl's unparalyzed because things happen. She's gone through therapy and now she can be Batgirl again.
So. You've seen a lot of changes in the city because it's a local show. You've been here for 20 years in this location.
My first places was where Arby's is at, south of here.
Arby's right by on the frontage road?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was there for 5 and here going on 17.
What type of building was it over there? Was it something similar to this?
It was a very small building that had another half in it that when I moved in there was a pawn shop, and then over time there was some guys that sold Indian souvenirs, and then some guys had a car dealership when I moved out.
Oh, wow.
And I was looking at maybe acquiring that corner, but they sold the entire property to Arby's instead of breaking it up into pieces. I would have outgrown that building anyway, but I've outgrown here, but it's too much to move.
I was going to ask you about that because
it'd be nice to move, but people know where you're at too.
It looks like a geek's closet in the best way possible, but I don't want to call you a hoarder, but you got stuff everywhere.
There's a place for, sometimes I can't find stuff.
I can't find it. No.
But when people ask you for something, you know where it's at, then they are amazed you know where it's at because mainly when it's just me, if I put it there, it's still there unless somebody bought it or moved it around.
I just want to paint a picture for people that haven't been here. There are newsstands on all of the walls that are filled so much that they're overflowing with comics. Now, these are the newer comics, so these are the ones that are like the $2.99, $3.99.
Current issues, yeah.
There are long boxes from the floor up until, 3 feet?
Or back issues of a box like that there.
So there's more there. They're
mid-range.
Yeah, mid-range. You have collectibles all hanging up. What are your most expensive comics that you have that are, I would call them at the top shelf because they're up along the top of the walls here where little fingers aren't going to touch, which we need to reiterate, the kids aren't allowed in here without the parents.
It's just not an environment for letting a kid loose.
Oh, absolutely.
Kids come in with a parent they haven't interested on their own because they've made the parents bring them here, most likely. Old books, as much as they're nice to look at and are nice to have on the wall, the internet has taken the back issue market to a way that you get to look at the ones on the wall because they don't sell very well, sell very often because of the easiness for somebody to order them and or buy them in a trade paperback now and buy the whole storyline to just read it rather than have an expensive single issue and take care of it and that. But the newer stuff, it's all hit and miss. You know, it's something that's underprinted. The example is Walking Dead. You know, when something like that takes off, there's 2 or 3 other books that wouldn't sell as well as they do, but they're headed to television. And when that's the case, Outcast, with the same guy that wrote Walking Dead, Rachel Rising, if it's a book about a zombie girl, and you know there's the theme too. AMC licensed Preacher. That was a popular series in the late 90s. It ran 67 issues, but we never thought it'd come to film because the movie companies didn't want to do it because it would mandate a sequel. If it did just the first arc, you couldn't have just one movie. HBO passed on it because they said they weren't comfortable with that material.
Enlighten me about the material, please.
Preacher's a guy who it's written by Garth Ennis, and a devil and an angel hid their illicit offspring in this preacher, so when he speaks with any kind of authority, his word balloons turn red and he speaks with the voice of God and people does what he says.
Oh, wow.
And so to bring that to TV, it's pretty irreverent to the point where people may not like it, depending on how they play it into him using the voice on God. That's his intention, but he's got an assassin girlfriend and a 100-year-old Irish vampire as his traveling buddies. And so it's a road trip thing with this guy in the voice and the people they encounter. It was a fun story, but it was a vertigo.
That's the sound of business, ladies and gentlemen. The sound of a transaction. Got to keep the shop open. The sound of this bag is $35. These are not cheap. But, you know, how much are you going to pay for your passion? What is it worth to you? It's a good question.
Thanks, Mike.
So,
if they were cheap and on the newsstand, there wouldn't be as many books, I guess. But the variety and the age of the customer. You know, a kid can't afford a $4 comic unless their parents are funding him. So for the most part,
you need to get paper out or something, right?
I give these kids they come in with their parents, but usually the parents buy their own, and then they indulge the kids, and then the kids read. As they get older, they start reading the parents' stuff, depending on their interest and how long term. People ask me all the time how business is, and I tell them that my customers buy as many comics as their wives will let them.
Oh my God, and that is not a joke. Because no, I haven't been in here, besides the Christmas order, I haven't been here in a long time because I would spend about $60 every 2 weeks. And you just dive into these universes and you can't get out. It's, I mean, I'm not, what do we say? I'm happy that I have a wide imagination and I can go through it, but at the same time, you do got to check your budget because if you don't have the money, you can't play at the table.
The crossovers pull you in a way that, you know,
oh my God.
They would like you to buy everything tagged to some theme, but most of these guys, if they're buying something, they'll buy the main book they're buying and the core book, and then the other things get passed on, depending on what happens in it. Sometimes something important happens in an unimportant book because they know you're not buying it, and
I bought everything related to the reboot of Death in the Family, and I loved every second of it. And how many books were those? It was like 20?
It was a good checklist.
Oh, my God. It was huge.
Now we're 3 parts into the Return of the Joker.
Oh, God.
Endgame is the second act of the Joker's return to this new DC universe. And the writer, you know, if he's supposed to stay till number 50, then this is going to put us up into the early 40 numbers, and we'll see where he's going to go before he leaves. But this might be the big Joker finale for this. As we get toward March and April and May, and DC's going to acknowledge 30 years of crisis on Infinite Universes.
Oh, wow.
That was, or Infinite Earths in 85.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have some new I'm not sure what they're going to do with their universe, but it'll all be in transition in March and April and May. And Marvel will look at the same kind of 30-year thing with 1985 Secret Wars. So the big summer stuff is going to be derived from 30 years ago's events.
Okay. How do you feel? I got to sit in at went to a Comic-Con, and Claremont was talking, Chris Claremont, about how he really wishes he could spend more time on the book, but all people want is release dates. And these stories aren't, they don't have as much weight. How do you feel about that?
Claremont's an old school writer, and he takes a long time to develop something. And he worked on the book, he worked on X-Men for 18 years. And people liked his writing, but because he was the same guy that wrote it, a year later, he could still pick up threads from what he'd left hanging. And when he left in 93, he didn't want to share co-plotter status credit with Jim Lee. So he left the book, and the writers that took it on after that turned it into more of a streamlined adventure instead of the detailed layered stuff that Claremont had done. So he wants to develop something that's complex and long-term, but with attention spans of American public. We want immediate payoff, and some of these guys work on one book. They don't hook their story into a crossover, and there's so many crossovers that sometimes you got to move your story into the other one because you got to bounce into it. Straczynski left Thor a few years ago because he didn't want to play into a crossover, and now the book sells better right now because we got a woman in the Thor costume.
Yeah, but it's also almost pornographic, and I was going to ask you about that.
We don't know who she is. Oh, it's fun because she's powerful enough to inscribe an S on the hammer for the word he, to say she may wield the power of Thor, but we still don't have a clue. We have 3 or 4 theories of who she might be.
Really?
But unlike the new Captain America, which is obviously the Falcon, that was a proper handoff with Steve Rogers being old.
Absolutely.
We have a Falcon or a Captain America with wings, and basically it was a Falcon with Captain America's suit on, and there's no secret. But the Thor person, we don't know if it's his mother, Odin's granddaughter. We've had 2 or 3 other theories.
But wouldn't that go back to the writer with the longer storyline that maybe you enjoy better? Or
when the Red Hulk came into play a number of years ago, the mystery that opened up the storyline was who is the Red Hulk?
Yeah.
And they pointed fingers at 2 or 3 people, and the creative team was asked at the summer convention circuit who he was, and they told him, if we give you that, we got nothing. It was 3 years before they gave that up. I don't think we wait 3 years for the identity of this Thor girl, probably within the first story arc, because they'll want to open it up and have it. We got to go on. We got to move on and find out why Thor can't hold his hammer no more, because something has deemed him unworthy, and we want to know. We don't know what that is. So he's mad because she's got the hammer, but he can't pick it up. So it's sort of it'll go from there.
It's gonna be a lot of unwrapping. I have to wrap a lozenge. It's December, and I want to feel better. I got a question. How do you feel about the Fox owning X-Men and Marvel owning the Avengers?
Disney owns Marvel.
Well,
and,
sorry.
Well,
my mistake.
Marvel owns everything that they own, but they license stuff out when they wanted to have movies on the circuit that they couldn't afford to do themselves. And they should have signed short-term deals on those things, but they signed open-ended ones where as long as there's a movie in development, these companies can keep the license. So Sony will keep Spider-Man until, maybe another hack will get them to sell Spider-Man back to Disney.
Oh my God! I heard a really cool interview with. Oh wow! Now my brain doesn't work. Sam Raimi, and it just said it was the most pressure he's ever felt in his whole life. If he had the chance to do the third one, he would have taken it a different way. But personally, I think those movies went into the toilet. Oh my God.
I think the farther down the movie series there is, the more corporate control. Tim Burton had control over the first Batman movie because I don't think they expected much of it.
Of course.
And it did well enough where he had more creative control over the second one, so it had that black and white snowy motif he likes to work with.
Oh, absolutely.
But then when he didn't do the third one, and you give it to Joel Schumacher.
Oh God, Mardi Gras all the way.
And you make it humorous. And
there is no need for that. I mean, if you look at the early Batman, Batman Forever, and Batman and Robin, and then you put on the Dark Knight. There's no comparison.
The Nolans brought a realistic nature.
Oh my God!
And that's why they waited half a dozen years between them, so it wasn't considered to be Batman 4.
They had to.
And move away from Batman 5, move away from those other ones, and then start signing guys to multiple picture deals. So you don't have 4 Batman and three Batman instead of 4 movies. And they learn their lessons. Kilmer might have played him a second time, Keaton might have played him a third time, but when you got managers that negotiate your money for you, and you'd have been willing to do it for less, you should have signed the 3-picture deal with them.
Absolutely.
Now they do. They sign these guys in now. They got Sam Jackson doing 9.
Well, of course, he's only doing a half hour in each movie.
And then maybe a full Shield movie somewhere down the road, but or a Nick Fury film. But he's happy doing the cameos as much as we were liking seeing Stan at 92.
Oh God!
Until he can't,
No, absolutely.
But yeah, the movies help. Guardians helped. Well, not Guardians helped, but Avengers helped Guardians. Avengers came out this year, it'll be 3 years ago. And I saw a benefit from families in the year that followed because of that. And then when Guardians was a year away, people wanted the next Avengers then. And I think Guardians was the gap filler that people wanted, but Avengers wasn't coming out until next year. And they did that, It should have come out in the spring, but I think they had a movie season of lackluster stuff, and then that one did killer at the end of the season. But Avengers will do
the lion's share of the business.
This time.
Tell me what you thought about Guardians of the Galaxy.
It was fun. It wasn't Avengers fun because it didn't have Hulk and Thor and Loki in it.
Absolutely.
But for the Illinois Times giving it a review that called it Star Wars for a new generation, and they usually hate everything, that was a fair assessment from their side of things, and that's what it was. The Nova Corps was like starfighters, X-Wings.
And that's how I felt too. I really felt like A New Hope. I thought
Thanos is anywhere near Vader rather than Ronan. Ronan I thought was not done right, but that's okay. We want more James Brolin as Thanos, and we'll get bits and pieces until they've now made Avengers 3 2 movies.
Really?
It's going to be cut in half like the Harry Potter's films.
Really? I didn't know that. That's really exciting because you can tell more story.
They initially, when they were calling it Avengers 3 Infinity, and then they recently started calling it Civil War, but then they disposed that to be Captain America. Now they were calling number 3 Fallen Sun, but that's too much of a giveaway, so now they're calling Captain America 3 Civil War, and then Avengers 3 will be cut in half and be Infinity, so we'll have a bigger Thanos thing with the gems and what's the other?
Let me shoot in a question while you're thinking. What did you think of the Howard the Duck cameo in Guardians?
Did you know it was Seth Green doing the voice?
Yes, absolutely.
I think a lot of people don't get that.
Oh,
part.
Absolutely. There's
a lot of lingering disdain because of the 80s flop.
Oh God, it was terrible.
But if you sat through a movie,
but it was a cheesy movie, and it was supposed to be, excuse me, I don't know if they meant it to be a cheesy movie, but it's almost a cult classic now. I don't need to see a reboot of that personally.
It cost about twice what the movie would have been made budget-wise in those days, and was ridiculed because it did so poorly.
Oh my God!
But now with CGI and the success of these things, if you sat through a movie with a talking tree and a talking raccoon, you should be able to buy a talking duck.
He only said one phrase, and he did it well. He did it very well.
If he's been freed from the collector's collection, he'll pop up in other films just because Marvel wants. He gets a book in March, and instead of a world trapped in a world he never made, now it's trapped in a world he tolerates. But Howard gets a book again. It may not last very long.
Well, at least they're trying to cash in on something. So tell me, there's so much to talk about. You've got all kinds of collectibles. Oh, wow, he does get his own book. That's awesome. And what book are we reading that from?
The catalog for March is called Previews.
Nice.
And they set their print rate against our pre-order, so nobody gets stuck holding extras. So I'm trying to predict the future about 2 months down the road what people are going to be reading. So you don't have 100 copies of something you're selling at 5.0.
Holy crap. How do you do that?
Long-term track record of watching people buy and turn their nose up at stuff.
So you're like your own stock broker. You're like, this is going to be big in 6 months.
Yeah, you're kind of watching so you don't get, if you order 100 copies, sell one, the company can say they sold 100 copies.
Oh, shit, that sucks.
But then 2 months later,
stuck with
Yeah.
How do you can't get rid of it?
2 months later, they realized how much of a flop it was when you start ordering 5.
Oh my gosh.
But you just never order 100 for something that you're going to not sell nearly that of.
Because you said back to the conversation about you're anticipating. Excuse me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would anticipate the Star Wars one being a large book because it's going to come out, the new movie. But you're only ordering 60 of those.
I need 30 for a pre-order. 30 will probably accommodate the demand, initial demand. I mean, I may have underestimated it. I may get mobbed by people who want number 1 just because, but a million copy print
I would like to put my name on the list. I would love to put my name on the list.
A million copy print run with 75 covers. It might be available in enough places to where the problem will be not finding number 2.
Oh my god. Okay, so we're talking books. What is the launch day for the books?
Star Wars is...
No. Just the launch day for your comics as a general rule of thumb.
Oh, every Wednesday is new release day. There's some books come out on the same week every month because they got a certain pattern. Some things are unpredictable, but every Wednesday is the equivalent of DVDs get released on Tuesday to that market, and comics come out to this market on Wednesdays. And it never is the same because it's the next issue or the week of the holiday was very little, but now as we get into January, next week is Star Wars #1 and Walking Dead, so the second week of the month has appeal for that. The week after, Batman for the current storyline with Joker in it. There's anticipation. There's always something. There's a lot of stuff to wade through, but there's always something that these guys come back for every week because otherwise they wouldn't, or but they're going to buy them until either they quit making paper ones, or I've lost a few customers to death over the years because either they've had some misfortune in their life, or they were old to start with, and 20 years goes by, and sometimes health problems. When you didn't realize your customers had an ailment until you saw their name in the paper. Or something like that.
That's got to be hard.
On occasion, for most time you don't see them right up until that point because they quit as they were fading, and you didn't realize it until you saw them.
I would like to talk about the digital options that you have, because I purchase books here, and when I purchase the book, I can run the code through Marvel.com, and I can have it on my tablet. So if anybody doesn't want to buy the book because they want to have the actual physical book, which I've never heard before, you can have it online. And personally, when I read them, I'll read them once, I'll put them back. I like to keep my stuff very nice, very clean, and that's a really good way to flip through it. Maybe when you're eating, you're on your lunch break or something like that. For me, it's a little easier to look on my phone or my tablet, so I definitely wanted to bring that, to the listeners' attention.
DC, both Marvel and DC make their books digitally available. I'm not sure how much it benefits me.
Well, see, I buy it from you first, though. That's what I wanted to make a point of.
For the people that buy it digitally first, though, DC gives an option of $2.99 without the digital code, $3.99 with it, but not every book is offered with that option. Marvel charges pretty much $3.99 across the board, and there's a little sticker in the back of theirs that has the code under it that you can enter it and get it both ways. So it's provided, but then you're actually paying the $1 more that DC gives the option not to pay. So it's hard to, most of these guys want physical paper comics anyway. And
I do, but I just don't like people fondling them. I don't. maybe it's just me, but I don't want anybody touching them.
And there's people that are patient, by the trade paperback.
But I can't do that.
The digital thing.
I'll end up buying both. I'll buy the series and then I'll buy the trade paperback because I don't want to open up the actual comics themselves. Sorry, we had to pause it. We're doing transactions. You said one of your customers got out of a conversation with his family because he got something before Christmas. What was it?
Oh, he was glad that the book showed up right before Christmas because it allowed him to avoid his relatives to be diverted by reading the book instead of having to deal with his wife's relatives.
For me, though, I'd have to put a cover from like an encyclopedia on it because they know I wasn't paying attention anyway. I would say I'm studying for a test or something. It'll be fine. Let's talk about some of the collectibles, because you got some awesome stuff. We had to pause the show for two reasons. One, I can't get my shit together. Two, this is a business, so I'm sorry. We had a wonderful story off air that you will never hear because it was off the show and it was for us. Let's talk about...
talking about in your Facebook. That's what it is, you could never get those opinions into people's faces if you weren't going like, block, and they could block you, They could find a way to only see the stuff that they, don't find offensive, but then they probably never know where your head's at either.
Let's steer towards the shop. We got tell me about, you've got awesome collectibles from every era that I would say.
Most of these toys are new because old ones.
Well, I was saying era as in you've got Next Generation, you have Star Wars toys.
There's more toys now than there ever was because the sculpts are more detailed, and the stuff you had as a kid, we're too picky today to think that would be satisfactory. But where the department stores get regular lines and character licenses, this market gets more storylines and sculpts based on artist renditions, so that it looks like what you're buying is a comic book character rather than a toy in a regular toy aisle, toy store wise. And some things, the Breaking Bad figures that Toys R Us won't carry. I'm waiting for more of the Heisenberg.
Toys R Us won't carry Breaking Bad?
Because of the drug connection.
Oh, wow.
More than likely, the company will take out the little crack bag or the meth bag in it and make it a sellable. They wouldn't sell in the past.
But they sell it with the bag of blue here? You have access to it?
I'm waiting on more Heisenbergs now. They may have taken it out. Jesse didn't have them in them. But
I see.
When Toys R Us wouldn't carry Austin Powers figures because of Fat Bastard.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. This looks nothing like him either. This looks like Pauly Shore, doesn't it?
Yeah, more so than him. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it does not look like Jesse, but whatever.
Yeah, the Heisenberg had the hazmat suit and then the hat with the
suit. And the Odenkirk on the back for Saul.
That's on the way. That hasn't come out yet. But yeah. Oh, that's just a bobblehead for that.
What's that?
That's just a bobblehead. They're doing Gus, the black guy with the glasses. He has a toy on the way. So they're not done with his property yet. But as when Toys R Us won't carry him, chances are pretty good the company will take out the offending accessories so they'll be willing to carry them again, and it'll be the ones that have it in it.
Yeah, but yours will be more popular because yours will be the ones you can't get.
Yeah, the ones I sold initially. If the ones I get in as a reorder that haven't come in yet are changed, it'll be the same.
So
unless they still stand behind it and just won't carry them, period. They'd rather have people not get something there than have one mad parent, because they don't have one mad parent.
But isn't there stores where you can exclusively sell them, like yours, where yours is more of an adult?
I think my customers would be disappointed if I had the Freddy or Leatherface or Jason figures with the brown paint instead of red.
Absolutely.
Where they carry the brown ones because that was what they would tolerate, and the severed limbs and that they pack them behind the figure so it's not as offensive in that. I think if you're 18, you can buy whatever you want. And,
absolutely. Yeah.
That catalog is intended to be separated for if there's things in there that aren't appropriate. They usually let you know.
What catalog?
The previews.
Oh, okay.
But for the stuff it offers, if you got a parent buying it, they're the ones that approve what a kid buys.
Right.
And most people buying comics, most of them buy only comics because they can't afford to buy the toys in addition to. So it's almost a different market that buys the toys, depending on whether if you're mandated buying a case lot, then you're going to get extras hanging around, or some of them you can order one per and do a special order for somebody without having to get stuck with a bunch of extras. Because this market is basically non-returnable, that's why my shelves are so full. Or you'd order less, but then you couldn't get reorders for it, so you order enough, and then over time it builds up, and then it looks like they're overflowing, but you're trying to find ways to balance that out and have less left over.
Is there any big events that you have throughout the year for the store?
No.
No?
No, just Wednesday is delivery day, and when July 20th rolls around, that's probably more personal for being the anniversary of the store, but I've never really done anything for that, because I don't decorate for the holidays, because comics really don't acknowledge them inside their storylines, like soap operas, when it takes up a week for a party.
Okay.
And they have their week-long party show. But yeah, it'll be in the way, for one.
Okay.
If you put a garland or 4th of July stuff or that, because it's really not a seasonal type of thing. You get competed against by Christmas and graduation for parents, depending on the age of their kids, because people that are buying comics have a regularity to their expectations, and then when something diverts it, or you get a guy that comes in and his brakes went bad, well, he's got to pay for a brake job. His extra money is probably not going to go going toward comics for a while, or the teenage kid that comes in and tells you his girlfriend's pregnant.
Ouch.
It's pretty much an admission. You're not going to see him for a while because his obligations got different.
Let's go over a couple show segments. I've got if you were married for a day, it's just a 24-hour dream situation.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would change if you were married? Not married. You are married with kids. If you were mayor for a day, what would you change?
As far as the city, I would steal The Simpsons from Matt Groening.
Absolutely.
And
that's awesome.
And defy him to sue us, because we are it, whether he wants to admit it or not, and implement it in advertising, and I'd have Bart Simpson with an Abe Lincoln hat and a stovepipe or beard and stovepipe hat, just poking at the Lincoln things, but incorporating the Simpson stuff into an advertising thing that would make him almost unwilling to sue you, because it would give him bad press.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, we have another one. I'm going to preface it by giving my own version of this story. It's Lincoln's Losers section, where we can throw somebody under the bus if you want. For me, I met a very interesting character at a grocery store last night, and he was being an asshole to the checker guy. And if you've ever worked in service, you know that it's not a fun job. You don't necessarily want to be there, so why would you go out of your way to treat the clerk like crap? And I was like, it's really not bad. Or excuse me, I told the guys, like, it's really not that bad. And he looks at me, excuse me? And I said, oh God, I'm sorry. Are you a rapper or a pirate? And he was not African American, so this is not a black joke. But I said, are you a rapper or a pirate? And he said, neither, motherfucker. And I says, well, why is your front tooth gold? And he said, it ain't. And I was like, oh my God, it's just rotten. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have bothered you. So the guy from the grocery store last night, he is a Lincoln's loser.
I've done retail since I was 16. I'm 56. So I guess in 40 years you deal with the public in a way that I guess amazingly you want to treat people the way you want them to treat you. And if it's a waiter, you're not going to be mean to those guys because they get access to your food. And a checker is no different because they deal with all kinds of people.
There's no reason to be a dick to that guy. And the guy's, I knew it was going to be a quality conversation because he had a 20-ounce bottle of sugar water that he just couldn't wait to pay for, so he had to drink it. And then the store brand of Gardettos that he's just eaten. And then he's yelling at the clerk to hurry up because he's got places to be. So I just told him, I said, sir, your life's not that bad. And then he turned around and smiled with his rotten tooth.
Or he can come in.
I know it's a big question. We can come back to it.
Yeah, there's nobody I would throw in the bus for,
That's hard, but the guy doesn't have a name, but he knows who he is. So,
the best revenge is doing better than the people that you've had conflict with, and knowing that not wishing them worse, but knowing that.
It's an amazing statement. I have learned that as I grew older and worked hard enough to achieve a point in my life where I had creative freedom. I'm not going to say success. I will say creative freedom. And for me, the best revenge is living well, because people wrap their minds around revenge, around spite, around hate. And if you look close, hate and love are on the same spectrum.
They're motivating.
Because you care so much about wronging this person, or that person's wronged you, and you spin in circles, and the only person that loses is you. That other person, I
think that's one of the things that, the irony of this is I got made fun of in grade school for comic books so heavily that I quit them in high school, in favor of rock and roll. And then the rock and roll high school thing begat me a job in the 80s in a record store. But this continued on the back burner to where when this became the option, when the guy that I worked for closed, my classmates look at me differently now, this many years later. Because they would have written you off then as just a stupid kid that was into comic books.
Yeah.
And now they look at you as a business owner, and your longevity speaks differently than...
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And I got more years.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's
So I'll be here before you know it, and if I thought my longest running competitor had been open 20 years, when she closed, they said that she'd been open 25. So I still have 3 more years to crest her numbers, and then whatever I put up on top of that, because I know 8 years from now, when I can say I've been open 30 years, won't be much different, except I'll be 8 years older.
But you have done it.
And the comic market will change on its own through that time too, for storylines, and
I think that speaks volumes at the amount of success, because the longevity that you've had. Because if I'm correct, you have a Facebook page, a group, but that's the only advertising that you do, isn't it? And you just tell people when the new books come out. I mean, you don't have a website, you don't advertise on the radio, you don't have commercials on TV. You stayed open for 20 years
when I went
word of mouth.
When I went mobile, they took me out of the phone book, and that was one thing to be in the yellow pages, but how many people actually look in the yellow pages anymore for anything? If you're, as long as you're searchable online and don't move when you're in the same place for so long with the kind of regular traffic and that, and reliability. If you'd had there's never been a week go by that I have never provided new books for no reason that, some people have interruptions for not paying a bill, or, but there's never been a week go by that I've not provided books, because I'm not going to get my books from somebody else.
That's awesome.
And that's really the motivator there too, is that
so what is your, I don't want to get too personal, but does your house have any comic book collector stuff there, or do you have to keep it all here?
My wife almost had a anti-superhero rule, but my kids are old enough now that they've grown up outside of it, because they've found different interests. My son's in the Air Force. My daughter wants to be a teacher. So I'll have to corrupt my grandkids with in the coming years. Probably the majority of it's here, just because it's under one. If I moved, I could expand, but that would be the bigger pain than trying to pick up this place. I moved in here after 5 years, and that was a pain. And after being here 17, I couldn't imagine trying to pick this place up and move it again. But,
it would take days and boxes and manpower, and you probably look at it at that point of, this is going to cost not only money but time. And would it be worth it?
The time I move out of here will be the time that I find a building that I'm not going to move out of ever again, and then set it up in a way that my hope is to be able to buy a building or move into a building that you can live in and consolidate to be
wonderful.
To where you just open up when you're awake and close down when you're shut down. And,
how would you do that though?
At first I thought I'd live upstairs, but I'd be coming up and downstairs quite a bit, so I think I'll just build a place in the back of it and still have the same residence kind of thing. But my long-term goal has been to build across from Darcy's, so when you drive over the overpass, you see a building there that screams comic books.
That would be amazing.
And that, but that's still maybe in my lifetime. The more I acquire at my age, the more my kids got to get rid of.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
And maybe by then having a building that would be an asset to them, but I'm figuring on the grandkids being the ones that I pull in and go, you guys can either go to school at 16, or I can show you how to run a comic book shop.
That's
and
amazing.
We'll see what they say, but that'll, by then they'll have their own directions on what they want to do too. For what my kids have.
It's wonderful to have goals and these dreams, and just to hear that your first response is to share it with your family. It's amazing. I mean, it speaks volumes about why you've been open so long, because you care about people.
Yeah, it pays the bills. That's the, I enjoy not having a boss, because I punched somebody else's time clock for 20 years, and the last 20 have been, or 20 plus, because my boss wasn't really a boss when you just showed up and worked and didn't have a time clock. But to not have anybody you know, your customers are your boss, and the government, you know, because somebody can shut your doors.
Without being too personal,
But,
is there any investors, or did you just have like I don't want to say a retirement, but how do you buy a comic book store?
I took out a very small loan and paid it off, and because I'd run a business for not quite 20 years before that for other people, that experience is what come along, and it's a specialized too. You know, Walmart can affect grocery stores and gas stations, but they don't do enough comic activity to really clamp down on the paper market. I see a diminishment of T-shirts because they're cheaper at Walmart, but they don't have the styles that we offer, and the variety of toys that department stores offer that are different than ours. But when they're not doing the print thing, even the Disney store didn't carry Disney comics because they didn't want the volatility of it, and those employees that work there had to come here for their Disney comics.
That's awesome.
And things like that, you know, when comics aren't as available in the newsstand market, these guys want to wait for them to show up in the mail because they get damaged, or they're going to pay the freight on them.
Right.
And there's more immediacy for that Wednesday thing because they know they're the day they came out. And some things vanish. You know, next month is a book called Spider-Gwen, and her first appearance came out a few months ago. It took off. Who'd have thought it? You know, but when you get cleaned out of a book like that, the guys that came in that particular day just looking for that book, and they've never come back since then. But the speculators that knew that she was going to get a book, or fans of that character, you can never predict what's going to go up, because if you did that, you know, The Crow was not real popular in the late 80s, but the movie and the tragedy of Brandon Lee's death made that a completely different cultural thing.
We were talking about that the other day, me and my fiance. Now, that was gunshots, right?
He had a wadding in the barrel that flew out and killed him, the same as a bullet would have. You know, that wasn't
wadding, like
something that probably shouldn't have been there, or a chunk of something that was in the barrel that really wasn't a bullet, but
still the projectile.
It acted the same as when it shot you, because it was pushed out the barrel, and probably unintentional unless somebody had something out for him, because his dad died, and the question was whether or not he could have given himself that injection.
What injection?
Bruce Lee died of an overdose, but then there was a question of whether...
He died of an overdose?
Yeah.
Overdose of what?
I would say heroin or something like that, but the question was whether he administered to himself, like George Reeve. George Reeve was dating a mobster's girlfriend, and he was found shot. But could he have committed suicide with the forensics to those days would have written it off. Today they probably go, that angle would have been wrong for suicide.
I didn't know Bruce Lee died of I thought it was a heart attack.
No, I think it was drug related in the time period though.
Oh shit, what did he have that was so bad he needed heroin?
Money.
Oh my god.
When you got money you can be Michael Jackson, rich weird, you know.
Oh god. Yeah, but he was pretty much broke by the time he died. He had to do that tour. Learn something new every day. There you go. All right, well, we are going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for being on the show. The city tournament starts on Friday. Why is this important to the show? MilesT-shirts.com has designed and printed 4 different shirts for all the public schools. Rather than tell you he's doing big things, we're going to show you. MilesT-shirts.com, top-notch printing at a great price. We haven't talked yet about some of the dope socks you can get from Laces Footwear. These socks feature street art, such as ankle bracelets, chicken and beer, Old Dirty Bastard, and so much more. The best way to describe it is, if you want your wardrobe to pop like it came straight off Snoop's Instagram, come into the shop today. Why buy kicks and threads at separate places when the freshest gear is all at Laces? LacesFootwear.com. If you want to hear more of the show and less commercials, drop some change in our digital tip jar. You can help crowdfund it at patreon.com/Lincoln's Legends Podcast. You know, not everything that happens on the show is posted on Facebook and Twitter. Some of the content is better to be shared just between us. Right now, there's a list of friends that get weekly updates and show news. Don't be left out of the party. Join our mailing list at Lincoln'sLegendsPodcast.com. I'm stoked to announce that in February, we're making audio history across the local music scene, bringing you an episode that's so big it has to be released in 2 parts on 2 separate platforms. Now you're probably wondering what guest or topic could warrant such a concept. Well, for that, my friends, you're going to have to stay tuned in order to find out.